Okay, so we got a lot to cover this week. Here's the plan. I'm going to talk about Tesla first, then Starship, then Starlink, which is related to Starship, of course, and Mars, which is related to both. We're going to have a Q&A at the end. And I just put in the chat, I'm going to put it again, that I have a new video going live, about Starlink and Mars. That goes live at 3 p.m. today. I'm expecting this live stream to go to 2:30 or 3 p.m. So that video will be up at 3 p.m. So there's a lot to cover. So let's get into it. First things first. Before we get into the other stuff, I just wanted to cover Neuralink, and I got to put on my glasses for this so I can read it. Just this morning, or just today, just this morning, Elon was asked about Neuralink. He was asked about whether you could overclock your brain with Neuralink. And he said, no, you can, that Neuralink will help access the supercomputer that is your brain. And somebody else asked whether your brain could overheat or the chip could overheat. And Elon said that there's a sensor in the chip that prevents it from overheating. Good morning, everybody. So that just wanted to knock that one out of the way. And that's it for that. So let's go right into Tesla. So first thing is, Elon talked about, somebody asked Elon about vertical takeoff and landing electric jet. He gets asked about this all the time. Golly from Hyperchange loves to ask. Golly from Hyperchange loves to ask about a vertical takeoff and landing jet. Other people love to ask about a vertical takeoff and landing jet. Elon said he has enough on his plate already, and there's enough on Tesla's plate. So he consistently downplays the idea of doing a vertical takeoff and landing jet. If you haven't heard my view on jets before, I think the market for a vertical takeoff and landing jet is very small. If you think about the air travel market, you have short haul flights. So I live in South Florida, a flight to Tampa, a flight to Jacksonville or Tallahassee, or maybe even Atlanta. That's a fairly short trip, and while a regular plane can make it fairly quickly, a VTOL jet doesn't really serve that trip. Also, loops and hyperloops and regular robotaxi rides, even on regular roads, are going to be competitive with short-haul aircraft. I made a video, if you go back in my channel, it's one of my most viewed videos, 10 industries that Elon Musk and Tesla are going to destroy. I think the airline industry is done for. The short-haul trips are going to be taken over by robotaxis, and loops, boring company loops, are going to handle all the short-haul trips. Hyperloop is pretty much going to be able to handle anything on a continent. It may be achieving 600-mile-an-hour speeds, which is fast as a plane. It's going to be easier to do. It's going to cost less to ride. So there's really not much market there. And intercontinental trips, a lot of the long-haul trips are going to be taken over by Starship point to point. I don't see a lot of room left for conventional airplane travel. And then electric vertical takeoff and landing jets can get you somewhere really fast, but it's not faster than Starship. Maybe New York to Los Angeles is a smart thing. I don't know. I think there's a whole bunch of issues with electric VTOL, and I just think the market's small, and maybe it's a market for ultra-rich people, but that's just not a big enough market to sustain the investment, the R&D, and everything else. Really quick to address CM's question about joining the S&P 500, or is it just hype? Sooner or later, Tesla will join the S&P 500. It's somewhat important. It's more important in the short term. It would likely spike the stock in the short term. Quick plug for the shirt, by the way. And I want to thank Halter Ferguson. I want to thank Bradford Ferguson of Halter Ferguson Financial and all my Patreon supporters for supporting this channel. That helps us grow. I'm about to take the next step in upgrading the look and feel of this channel. You'll see that soon. So S&P 500 is important in the short run. You'll see a jump in the stock price when it happens. In the long run, it doesn't really matter. What matters is, can Tesla make the cars? Can Tesla make the profits? That's the valuation. It may add stability to the stock price. Right now, there's a core group of investors like me who aren't selling. So I have my amount of stock, and a lot of other investors have a certain amount of stock, and they're holding till 2030 or whenever. We're not selling, so we provide stability to the stock. We provide a sort of backstop that the stock isn't going to go below a certain threshold. On the other side of it, if you have S&P 500 inclusion, what happens is a large number of passive index funds that tie themselves to the S&P 500, they will be required to buy the stock, and that will be a short-term spike in demand for the stock that will raise the stock price. But it's also steadies the stock in the sense that they can't sell as easily. You know, if the share price goes down, they may have to sell some. I don't think that affects how much they hold. They're going to have to hold a certain amount of the stock as long as it's in the S&P 500. So that just creates more stability on the low end for the stock. So, won't it take at least 20 years to build a Hyperloop network throughout the U.S.? Tunnels take at least a year each. So, going to this question of what I said before about vertical takeoff and landing jets, and I don't think there's a market for it. Don't underestimate how fast these tunnels are going to happen. Once the Boring Company is satisfied with the Prufrock boring machine, once they reach a certain level of efficiency and speed with a boring machine that they have now, they can make as many as they want to make. So if you want to bore a 1 mile tunnel, you only use one machine. But if you're going to bore a 20-mile tunnel or a 100-mile tunnel, you just use more boring machines. So once you make, you could make 100 boring machines. You could make 1,000 boring machines. So there's no real reason why There's no real reason why the Boring Company can't make 1,000 boring machines or more and bore tunnels really fast. If the market is there, if it becomes sensible, then, and I should mention, by the way, there's a channel called A Boring Revolution by my friend Will. Will's in the UK. He loves the Boring Company. He just released another video updating what's happening in Las Vegas. If you pay attention to what's happening in Las Vegas, you can start to think, wait a minute, if they can do, they're in Las Vegas, they're basically done with the first stage of the project. They're extending the project. I don't think he mentioned it in the recent video. They're extending the project to a couple of casinos nearby. They're probably going to extend to the airport, but there are some longer extensions that they're planning to do. And Will thinks they're going to use 6 or 8 boring machines for each of those tunnels. So, if they're able to expand in Vegas that way, there's no reason they can't expand in other places that way. You just build more machines. So I don't see, I think the Boring Company, robo-taxis, and SpaceX Starship point-to-point really diminish the market for electric VTOL. It sounds like a cool idea. Elon makes sense. It goes up until it gets to a certain altitude, and then it goes supersonic in the thin atmosphere. It makes sense. It's just very difficult, and then there's the regulatory issues. So, the fun news for Tesla was Tequila was introduced. I did hear about it. I did have the opportunity to buy it before it sold out. I just couldn't talk myself into paying $250 for a bottle of tequila. Number one, I don't drink tequila. I drink rum. It looks cool. Maybe it's a collector's item. I don't know how much higher the price can go than $250, but I don't play collector's games. I'm not into Tesla for the merch. The only regret I have is I didn't buy the Boring Company flamethrower. I think I should have bought that, but just because that would be cool. But short shorts, whatever. To me, I'm more serious about Tesla. I like to have fun with it, but I'm more serious about it. So, another detail is a lot of this is going to be things that Elon said on Twitter in the last week or so. Elon talked about the purpose, his purpose in Tesla's growth. Why he gets a lot of stock options as part of his package as the CEO. That was part of the deal, and he gets a lot of criticism for this package he gets. So, and he explained the purpose of the stock options is they're needed to help pay for humanity to get to Mars in 10 to 20 years. I don't think Elon trusts the US government or other governments to pay for the cost of Mars missions. I think we're going to see SpaceX do a Mars mission in 2022 or 2024. That's going to be a cargo mission, not humans. I'm hoping we see a cargo mission in 2022, and then we see a lot of cargo missions in 2024, and then the initial human missions, the initial human missions in 2026 or 7. I forget when the window is. Elon has a huge package. Hello, everybody. So, just to get, when people complain about Elon's pay package, don't forget, I don't think he gets his salary. He just gets stock, and if the stock goes up, then he earned it. But his purpose is he wants to get humanity to Mars. Sometimes I watch that and I think he knows something. He knows the planet-killing asteroid is coming, and he wants to get as many people off Earth before the planet-killing asteroid hits. I don't know. That's a theory. So, some other updates about full self-driving. People keep asking him. We have full self-driving in beta, the new version of full self-driving that does 4D. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. That uses 4D labeling instead of single image labeling. That should greatly accelerate the improvement in full self-driving. And Elon mentioned that he was asked about it. He said, right now it's in the US in early beta. As it expands, he expects it to extend to Canada and Norway next. So if you're in Canada and Norway and you're watching this, full self-driving, the new version is coming to you soon. So I got something wrong. I think this was on Twitter. I don't remember. Somebody suggested this video to me. It's a video, Dr. Knows-It-All or something like Dr. Knows-It-All. And you can go to this Clean Techno article. If you Google search this Clean Technica article, they have a link to the video. This guy explained how full self-driving's new version works and why it's important. And I thought, well, I tried watching it, and I thought it took him a long time to get to the point, and I didn't really follow it. And I gave up, and I decided it wasn't worthy. And then, of course, today, Elon said it was a good explanation, so I watched it again. So a couple of key details about what's special about the new full self-driving that I now know, and I was wrong about. It has to do with object detection, and I was aware of that there's this issue where the original full self-driving software, it's collecting the images from 8 cameras, let's say 30 images a second, and it also has radar and other information. If the car had if there was a driver intervened, that would be sent back to the home office, and somebody would look at it and say, okay, what happened here? And there would be an effort to identify objects that appear in the video. What is this object in the video that may have caused this intervention? And the guy in the video, the recent video, talks about dogs and cats and how the software is able to identify objects. It can identify a dog, it can identify a garbage bag in the street, it can identify another car. What I was aware of before that Omar Kazi explained in an earlier live stream interview I did is the software, the labelers right now have to label 8 individual pictures, 8 individual cameras, 30 frames for a second, which is a lot of work, and they have to sort of link everything up to identify an object. The new labeling system, you label something once in a video stream and the software recognizes it from the video stream, so that makes the job for the human labelers much, much easier. So that was good. And then there's this issue called trajectory projection or trajectory prediction. In other words, the software has identified an object. It's important to know where the object is going. So if you see a car ahead of you and the right turn signal comes on, there's a good bet that that car is going to shift into your lane. Or it's going to make a right turn. There are certain things that we do subconsciously when we're driving. We see objects and we predict in our own minds, where's that object going? And maybe we have a probability vector of where we think these objects are going. If you look at Jim Keller's interview with Lex Friedman, he talks about this. Each object is a ballistic object and it has a probability of where it's going, and the software can interpret those things and figure out how to drive with that. So this guy does a great job, now that I see it, does a great job of explaining how trajectory projection matters, and that the new 4D, the foundational rewrite for FSD makes that easier. So, good there. And then Dojo. I am a fanatic about Dojo. I have a video about Tesla Dojo, and we've learned a lot more. I may need to make a new video about Dojo because we've learned a lot more about it. Elon says we rewrote all labeling software for 4D, labeled different from labeling single photos. Dojo won't contribute for about a year. And this was kind of interesting to me. He said it's a generalized neural network training computer. They're trying to benchmark it on frames per second, and it has to beat the next generation of GPUs and TPUs. GPUs are graphics processing units. That's what's in a typical video card, like the video card on my new computer that we're shifting to and live stream next week, and what I made my last video on. And TPUs, which are tensor processing units, which is what Google uses for its AI. So the goal is to make these new processes, which I think I mentioned in the past, are 16-point floating point processors, to make that system work. And apparently it's still a year away. So, I don't know if that's Elon time or not. It may be longer. It seems to keep getting pushed back. Here he says version 1 is about a year away. This was a question of what's going on with Dojo. The theory is that once Dojo is live and running, the software will learn much faster. That's the goal, to get the software to learn faster and faster and faster, because this is the march of nines. The software is already pretty good. In a lot of ways, it's already better than a lot of human drivers, but there are a lot of situations that it still isn't ready for, and it has to learn and get better. And Dojo is going to help train that. So, we also have Cybertruck news. Elon said the Giga Texas factory will be an ass kicker, and he referred to Cybertruck as it's basically a tank from the future, so it's going to be an ass kicker. That's fun stuff. Somebody asked about whether Cybertruck would come to Europe in the past, and Elon had said he didn't think the current version of Cybertruck that's planned would be accepted on European roads. And someone in Europe said there's an extra certification that people can get on their licenses to get them. So Elon sounded exciting about that. So if it's possible to get Cybertruck approved in Europe, the current planned version of Cybertruck will appear in Europe. And I think some people may have seen this already. People asked about Cybertruck, and Elon said it's going to be better with many minor tweaks. Even the small details matter. There's a lot of people have been talking about this. What are the tweaks? What's going to be different? I think that one of the more significant tweaks is we're probably going to see a minimum range of 300 miles. When Elon officially announced Cybertruck, they had the Cybertruck reveal. They talked about a 250-mile range for the single-motor Cybertruck. I think it's not going to be very hard for them to achieve a 300-mile range with Cybertruck. So that's my first guess, is that the base Cybertruck will be 300-mile range. The dual motor will probably be 350 to 400. Maybe there's an option to go from 350 to 400, something like that. And we'll see about tri-motor. There's a lot of room for batteries in Cybertruck. If you check out I have a recent video about Cybertruck. Number one, I think it's going to be a lot lighter than people realize. And number two, it's going to have a lot of room for batteries. So, and I believe it's going to use iron phosphate batteries, but if you follow Battery Day, they said nickel manganese batteries, the high nickel batteries. We'll see what happens there. So, I think we covered Tesla. Let me just see what questions we have before I go further. Squirrels are very bad predictors in my neighborhood. Yeah, squirrels apparently are not that good at that. I think that animals in general are good to some extent, but we don't know. Cybertruck reservation. Cybertruck getting wipers and mirrors. Yeah, I mean, I think what are the other tweaks that we anticipate? A lot of people have asked that the air conditioning system, the HVAC system in Cybertruck, reach the back, the bed area, so that when you have the bed covered, if you're going to use it as a place to sleep, or you're going to use it for other reasons, that you have air conditioning and heating in the bed in the back of the truck. I think a lot of people would like to see a pass-through so that you can carry larger objects in Cybertruck. That's an example of a little tweak I think they'll do. I think what they might do for allowing solar, even though solar isn't really a practical thing to add to Cybertruck, I think they may do it, and they may come up with a more innovative way of doing it. I'm curious to think, let's see, Warren, if you think about towing, it makes a lot of sense to extend the range. So, I would suspect that 90% of people using Cybertruck will be using it for daily use, not towing anything, not carrying a lot of stuff, just driving around town. That's what we see with pickups. There are certain people who use pickups in a heavy-duty manner, and those people are going to want the high nickel battery pack, and those people are going to want the maximum range, because when you're towing or when you're carrying heavy objects, range is going to suffer. I don't think there's going to be a regular pickup truck, and Elon said the Cybertruck will be the same size as the one that the unveil. There may be a Wolverine model for other countries down the road. I think cheaper models of Cybertruck will use iron phosphate, but we'll see. So let's go on to Starship. Now I'm trying something. Let's see what we got here. I might be trying something different here, so let's see what happens. Let's see. Oh, here we go. So Elon said he's hoping to change the booster design to land back on the launch mount with no legs, and this will require extreme precision. So Starship has the Starship that we've all seen being built, and there's the super heavy booster, which is like the Falcon 9 booster that's supposed to take Starship up into space, increase the velocity, give it enough delta V so that it can accomplish its mission, getting into orbit and doing whatever it's doing beyond orbit. So the initial idea was that the booster would fly. I guess the initial idea was that the booster would fly back and land on another pad and then be brought over to the launch pad. Elon wants rapid reuse, so if the booster can land back on the launch pad, that would be much more capable of rapid reuse. So I think this is going to be one of the most interesting things that will develop in the next few months, is to see super heavy. We're going to see Starship do a 15-kilometer hop. That's one of the things I'm going to talk about in a minute. We're going to see Starship do a 15-kilometer hop this week or next week. We expect a static fire this week and maybe a hop the following week. That's going to be the exciting news coming up. But Starship isn't that important unless Super Heavy works. And Super Heavy should be easier than Starship. I think that's why they're developing it later. But if they're able to do what Elon says in this tweet and bring it back and land it on the launch pad so that there's another Starship waiting to be loaded by crane on top of the booster, you're going to see incredibly rapid reuse of that booster, and you're going to be able to see a lot of Starships flying in a fairly... it's hard for us to grasp what might happen. Right now we have a world where we see a launch every couple weeks, a couple launches a month, maybe even I think they called October Scrubtober because so many launches were scrubbed. If Tesla can get rapid reusability down, especially with the booster, and then they have another Starship waiting to launch, and the booster lands right in the spot again, they refuel it, put the Starship on it, and go again, you may see more than one launch a day. We may start seeing Starship launches daily, 2-3 times a day. It's going to be really amazing. And the cost per launch, if you haven't followed what's going on with Starship, if you don't crash the rocket, then the only real cost is fuel and, some operational expenses. So the cost of launching stuff becomes much, much lower. And it starts to make sense to launch a lot more stuff. So, that might mean Starlink network gets launched very, very quickly. The full Starlink build out happens very, very quickly once Starship is operational and rapidly reusable. So, all right, let's skip that. And then let's go to, so a couple things we have here. This was just a cool animation I saw. I don't remember if this is Kim Talvidi. This is a cool animation of Starship releasing a Starlink payload. I thought that was kind of cool. So Elon was asked, somebody put this animation up, which I'm going to show you in a minute, and Elon said that this was brilliant. So this is by ERCX Space with the help of SMVLL-STVRS. So I'm going to show you this animation while I'm talking. Let's see. So this is a simulation of what the full Starship launch is going to look like. I don't think this isn't the hop. I think I have another animation that I'm going to show you in a minute that's going to be the hop. But this is so Super Heavy's on the bottom and Starship's on the top. It's launching up. Again, this is from ERC X, I forget. I think it's going to be at the end of the video. So Super Heavy is bringing it up and accelerating it to a certain velocity, and then they're going to split. This is main engine cutoff. If you've watched a Falcon 9 launch, the stages separate. The booster's going to go back and land. This booster has legs. Elon has said they're going to try to do it without legs, so that's going to be different. Now the Starship ignites its engines. It's going to go further up into a higher and faster orbit, and it's going to release the Starlink satellites. Meanwhile, the booster comes back and lands. Now, like I said, Elon said, you know, they're going to try to do a precision landing. Can you guys all hear this? And oh, Starship fuel being used is methane with liquid oxygen. So now at this point in the animation, Starship is at the orbital velocity or close to the orbital velocity needed for the Starlink satellites. The Starlink satellites are going to be released. Alligator style opening. This is what people think the plan is for Starship. And then I believe Starship is now going to come back. Now Starship is entering the atmosphere at a really, really high velocity. And it's going to do this belly flop maneuver. They didn't show the heating as it enters the atmosphere very much, but it does this belly flop maneuver and then comes down and lands. This is, and Elon said this was a pretty good animation of what Starship's going to look like. So I think it's ERCX Space. It's on his channel on YouTube. So check that video out. And then I think this is what we're expecting this in the next week or two. This is from, you can see the channel in the upper right corner. We're expecting this in the next week or two. This is the 15-kilometer hop. Now, Elon didn't endorse this one, but this is an expectation of what's going to happen is Starship on its own is going to launch up to about 15 kilometers in altitude, and then it's going to belly flop and come back down. So current projected Starships per year production goal. I think that Elon talked about 2 a week, so that would be 100 a year. Just to answer your question. So now Starship is up way out of sight. We're zooming in, and we're going to see Starship belly flop. And it's going to use its fins. The engines are going to cut off, and it's going to start coming back down. This is something, we're going to see something close to this in the next couple of weeks. Of course, this is an animation. It's using these fins to stabilize itself as it falls. And I don't remember where the tweet was. I should have found this. Elon said there's a really good chance there's going to be a crater. If it doesn't do well, it should hit the Gulf instead of the pad. But if at a certain point it's doing well, it's going to try to steer back to the pad. And if it doesn't do well after that point, it will do a lot of damage. So we may have a rapid unscheduled disassembly, which is part of the testing process. So don't panic if you see this happen. But here you can see it sends itself back to the pad and lands. And if it doesn't go well, we're going to see. That's ideally how it's going to look. So I hope you guys like that. We're seeing a lot of progress with Starship. I'm very excited about this. So, all right. So let's skip that. And let's move on. So that's Starship. And I have a lot of Starlink news. And I want to start with Dave Lee. Dave Lee is a channel I follow on YouTube. He talks about investing. He just interviewed Steve and Mark Ryan from Solving the Money Problem. Great interview. If you haven't seen that interview, I don't always agree with these guys, but I love what they do, and I love hearing them talk. And there was a great conversation between the two of them about what they're doing. He has this video that came out, I think this morning or last night, where he projects a value of Starlink at $1 trillion. I watched his video. I think he's wrong. I want him to be right. I mean, I don't really, I don't think most of us are able to own stock in SpaceX, so it doesn't really matter in that sense. But I don't think Starlink can serve. Dave he assumes that Starlink will serve 100 million people. I'm not sure that Starlink's network will be capable of handling that many connections. I think the optimistic scenario is 44,000 satellites. So if each satellite is handling 100 people at a time, 44,000, that's like 44 million. A lot of the satellites are going to be over the ocean. The ocean, there's more ocean than there is Earth. So a lot of points in time, the satellites are not going to be over populations. Elon has said it's not going to be able to serve cities well. It's only going to serve primarily rural populations people on oceans, people on airplanes. There's a market for it, but Dave put it as 100 million people, and I don't think there's enough people for that. Also, his analysis went to 2030, let's say, serving 100 million people, and he assumed a multiple, and I'm guilty of this myself in some of my videos. He assumed that SpaceX would be valued or Starlink will be valued based on a multiple because of its high growth. But if in 2030, it's already serving 100 million people, I don't know there's any growth left for it. I'm not sure where the growth comes from. Once it achieves its full market, then the growth opportunities are a lot smaller. So, Jim, yes, Starlink will be ideal for yachts, liners, airplanes. It's ideal for rural areas. I just want to mention the beta is spreading. That's coming. Maybe I think I may be coming up with this soon. Let me skip ahead of Dave Lee. So Elon was asked about the Starlink terminal. The beta version, it costs $499 for the equipment, and that includes a Wi-Fi router. By the way, I just spent like $200 on a Wi-Fi router, so it's really $299, and $499 including a $200 Wi-Fi router. Maybe it's probably a more valuable Wi-Fi router than that. But Elon said one of the goals is to lower Starlink terminal cost. That's their most difficult technical challenge. The current rollout of Starlink is north of Seattle. My cousin lives just north of Boston, and he lives in a remote area on a dirt road and doesn't have good internet. I think he uses slow satellite internet now, high latency satellite internet. So he's really excited. He is probably going to be getting the beta in the next few weeks. And when he does, I will probably have more direct information from someone I know really, really, that I've known since I was born. It's my older cousin, so I've known him since I was born or thereabouts. So I think there's a lot of progress there. Elon said right now the setup, there's a video. If you go check out Michael Sheets' Starlink, Michael Sheets' Twitter account, he has a quick video of the unboxing of Starlink. Elon said right now it's about 5 minutes to set up, but they hope to improve it and get it down to 3 minutes. So I don't know that 3 or 5 minutes is that important, but hey, that's great. Someone asked about boats. Somebody wants to connect in the middle of the Pacific. So, this is the really amazing use case for Starlink is for people who don't currently have good internet access. If you've been on a cruise ship, if you've been on an airplane, if you've been on a yacht or any other situation where you're out of cell phone range, internet access is very, very slow and it's very high latency if you have any at all. Starlink is going to make the internet completely global anywhere on the world. If you set up one of these antennas and you have an account and the country you're in allows it, I'm not sure how that's going to play out. That's another challenge for Dave Lee's analysis is if China doesn't allow Starlink, then there's a billion people that won't be available. We'll see about, India's regulatory hurdles. It's going to be a challenge. Let me just address this. Jim says Starlink version 2 in the future may grow to handle 20x the traffic. So this is one of the questions is, and this relates to the video that I'm releasing that goes public at 3 o'clock today. How much bandwidth can one satellite handle? How much bandwidth can it handle? I believe I read it can handle 20 gigabits per second throughput. So like I have 200 megabits per second download to my house right now. So that's 1,000. 20 gigabits per second would be 1,000 times what I have. 220. That's 100 times what I have to my house right now. So I suppose it's possible that later versions of Starlink satellites will have greater total throughput. And the other question is, how many connections can they handle at one time? If you have a Wi-Fi router at home and you look into it, a lot of Wi-Fi routers have a limited number of connections they can handle at a time. I just bought a new Wi-Fi router because we now have 5 people living in my house, and there's a significant portion of the time we're all watching, we're all streaming video. It was important to be able for our router to be able to handle more connections. So I sold my old router and bought a new router that is able to handle more connections. So I don't know how many simultaneous connections Starlink is going to be able to handle, an individual satellite. That's going to be an interesting question as well. So, and that's something I feel like Dave Lee just sort of started at this idea. Well, let's just assume 100 million customers. And that's a pretty big assumption. In the United States, most countries have a lot of the population in urban areas, and urban areas are, Elon has said repeatedly that Starlink will not serve urban areas well. A lot of the world is poor, and they're not going to be able to afford $1,000 a year for Starlink, although, 10 people could share a Starlink internet connection, and it starts to become more affordable. So I think there's a lot of potential for Starlink to serve poorer populations better than they're served now. So we'll see what happens there. So let's see, what's the other short news? Elon was asked about India. He said, he's hoping they're going to get regulatory approval in India by the middle of next year. If you're not familiar with India, the country is legendary for being difficult as having a difficult regulatory environment. So we'll see what happens in India. Germany, Viv, Viv is one of the accounts I follow. She's a part of Third Row Podcast. She's done interviews with Elon Musk. Viv is brilliant. She said that Starlink Germany is now an officially registered company, so I think we're going to see Starlink in Germany. Elon was asked about Florida. He said, I live in Florida, in case you don't know. I am probably not going to have Starlink because my internet is included in my homeowners association. I have 200 megabits per second down, sometimes 250. I don't think Starlink's going to be faster. I don't think it's not going to be worth paying $100 a month for me to add Starlink to a house when I already pay for high-speed internet. This is why Starlink's market is somewhat limited. A lot of people already have fast internet. It's primarily for people who don't have access to fast internet in other ways. So, but anyway, Florida should be getting it maybe January. So that means we're going to be seeing more satellites launched. I think they're doing about 2 Starlink launches a month. Each launch carries... what was it? 60? I think each launch carries 60 Starlink satellites. So if you go 3 more months, that's going to be 120, 360 more satellites in orbit. That's still a long way from the fully operational Starlink network, but we're getting a lot closer, and we may start seeing access going further south. So that's exciting. Elon mentioned Canada, where he was asked about Canada, and this article says that the Canadian regulatory bodies they've given a second round of approval to Starlink for Canadians. It's not really clear to me why. This is one of those frustrating things about, I'll slip a little bit of libertarianism in here. Why are we letting government regulate satellite internet? I understand for bandwidth you're using, I think the reason why, I'll come back with the non-libertarian answer. There's a certain amount of, they use radio waves in certain frequencies, and there's other uses for those frequencies. So they need permission from the governments regulate who can use these radio frequencies. And the theory is if there's no regulation, the radio frequencies will be clogged endlessly and they'll all be useless. I believe that's the theory. Yes, I do think, somebody asked about Starlink at the cabin. So I'm planning to build a cyber cabin. If you haven't followed that, cyber cabin will have Tesla Solar, Tesla Powerwall, and probably Starlink as well, a Tesla HVAC if it's available. I'm making progress towards acquiring 2 additional lots, which I'm hoping I will have friends choose to build cabins on. And I think Starlink doesn't make sense for me alone. I don't know that I want to spend $100 a month for a cabin I'm at once a month. But if 3 or 4 of us, there's another lot. There's several lots up there that friends of mine here in Florida for whom it's a 2-hour commute and a good place to go. We're looking at these other lots, and if we have, 4 or 6 people, maybe we share 1 Starlink. Maybe that makes sense. I suppose I could bring Starlink back to my house, but what would be the point? I'm doing a live stream right now, and I have a 50 megabit per second up, and so let's see. In Australia, SpaceX has received approval to operate Starlink ground stations in Australia. I think we're going to see now. Australia is the other side. It's far south. So Starlink should work well far north and far south. I think Australia is going to see Starlink fairly soon as well. Australia and New Zealand maybe. So that's the Starlink news I had. Let's see what questions we have. Starlink can be used to supplement landline ISP bandwidth muxed together to give more. Yeah, but okay. So here's the thing. Nat says that it could be muxed with or work together with other bandwidth. Look, I've got 200 megabits per second down. If 5 of us in my family are streaming at the same time in 4K, which none of us streams in 4K, we stream in 1080p. But if we all started streaming in 4K, streaming on a phone, you don't need 4K on a phone. So, you know, we have a 65 or 75-inch TV downstairs. I forget how big. Yeah, 4K probably makes sense for that. On my laptop, 15-inch laptop screen, I always downset, you know, YouTube to 720p or 1080p because there's no reason to use 4K on a laptop screen. It's just not, the human eye can't see the difference. But if 5 people were streaming 4K video, that would be about 100 megabits per second down. It's about 20 megabits per second each stream for 4K. So, you know, I don't know why we have 200 megabits per second. I'm not complaining about it. I'm happy to have 200 megabits per second down. How do you think Elon will give preference to retail investors for Starlink IPO? I don't think that Elon will do that. First of all, I think that's something that's like handled by whoever does the IPO. I don't expect to see anything like that. $500 to get started on Starlink and $100 a month doesn't make sense for most people. It makes sense for people who are in rural areas or on yachts or airplanes who have difficulty getting a good connection. It doesn't make sense for me. The latency, I have fantastic latency on my computer now. I think I tested it the other day and it was like 3 milliseconds. I don't think Starlink is going to get that fast. Although that was, you know, a short ping. So we'll see. Internet video creators will like a portable Starlink. Yes, that's absolutely true. That's one of the big reasons why I would want Starlink is I would probably want to stream from the cabin. You know, who knows? My wife might toss me out and I'll be spending all my time in the cabin. We'll see. If I keep spending all my time on this, we'll see what happens. All right. So last thing on my list of things to talk about is Mars. So this is the video that is going public at 3 p.m. today. In about an hour and 20 minutes. I might move that up. I'll probably wait till 3 p.m. And here's a link to where the video is going to be. In the chat, there's a link to the video. There's a link in the description as well. So this is a video I'm making. And I talked about this last week, but I did a lot more research. And I put together a video breaking down, and I did a lot of calculations. Scott, ask your question again when I get to the Q&A, which is not going to be long from now. So you can see in the thumbnail, a laser going straight from Earth to Mars, versus, on the other hand, a network of Starlink satellites or Starlink-like satellites relaying lasers from Earth to Mars. And you can see two things. One, the path is longer if you do the relay method. It's not going to be a straight line. For those who aren't aware, the average distance between Earth and Mars is 140 million or so miles. I think that's 250 million kilometers, but don't hold me to that. Light travels at 186,000 miles per second or 300,000 kilometers per second. It works out to about 12 and a half minutes each way for a laser or any light or any radio wave to travel from the Earth to Mars. If you do it with the Starlink relays, it's going to make the distance longer, and there's going to be a brief delay at each relay, milliseconds. You know, a very short delay, but each relay is going to slow it up a little bit. So 12 and a half minutes might become 13 or 14 minutes. Now, for me, it's already such a lag, it doesn't really matter. And, you know, when they're closer, the time is shorter. At their closest, they get to 35 or 40 million miles apart. But then at their farthest, they're 250 million miles apart, which is around 400 million kilometers. So, so the challenge, the idea behind this video is, I talk about the inverse square law, that as this laser is going from the Earth to Mars or from Mars to Earth, it spreads out. And the bandwidth that can be, the power that it takes to send the signal or the power that is received on the other end falls off dramatically the farther you go. It gets worse by the square. So if you go twice as far, it gets 4 times worse. So the idea is by having these short hops, these short hop relays, that greatly improves the bandwidth, and then having a network of satellites improves the bandwidth. I think this is a pretty interesting idea. So to give you a sense of what it might look like, and this is a horrible let me do this one first. Oh yeah, let's do this one first. So this is if there were just 2 orbits of satellites. That would probably be about 10 million miles. Each hop would be 10 million miles instead of an average of 140 million miles. If you think about this, let's say it's 100 million miles versus 10 million miles. So you're 10 times closer. the 100 million miles is 10 times further. That's 100x the bandwidth. And you've got 2 paths. So you double the bandwidth again. And you can go the other way around the sun. So you can get, if you don't mind the longer trip, you can go the other way around the sun and you can 4x your bandwidth. So you get 100x your bandwidth and another 4x for having additional paths, and you get 400x the bandwidth. Now take that analysis and say, wait a minute, let's do 9 orbits. This, I think I only squeezed 6 in here, 6 or 7 in here, but imagine if you had 9 loops of satellites and they're only 2 million miles apart. Now your hops are 2 million miles instead of 100 million miles. That's 50x, but that's 2500x the bandwidth. And then you multiply by 9 because you've got 9 paths and another 9 going the other way. So you multiply by 18. So you've got 18 times, so it's a dramatically larger bandwidth. So that's the big idea. That's the video you can check out. So let's get back to this. So somebody asked a question, how long do you think it will take Starlink to become profitable? I think Starlink will become profitable very, very quickly. If you're talking about, let's say, I think once Starlink is operational and it has, let's say, 10,000 satellites in orbit, then a million customers should be straightforward. That's 100 customers per satellite. I think that's about right. If you have 1 million customers paying $100 a month, let's call it $1,000 a year. That's $1 billion a year in revenue. So I think there's the question about how long it takes to amortize. There's an accounting question. You have to amortize the cost of launching the network. Maybe I'm underestimating the number of customers that they'll be able to serve. We'll see about that. Is there any info on when Starlink comes to Australia? I think it's soon. I think it's a question of, this is Graham Newburn asks, I live on a yacht in Australia. Is there any info on when Starlink comes to Australia? Australia has approved ground stations. I think that is internet networking hardware that SpaceX will use as part of Starlink operations. But if Australia has approved that, then I would expect sometime January, February, March, I think we'll see Starlink operating in Australia, maybe sooner. Thaddeus Walker, my guess is, Thaddeus, I addressed Lagrange points briefly in the video that airs at 3 o'clock, that goes public today at 3 o'clock, in about a little more than an hour from now. My guess is that they will only use Lagrange points 4 and 5 of each planet for the purpose of getting around the sun. So let me address what Thaddeus is talking about here. What you can see on this image, let me move this over. What you see on this image is the Earth and Mars are far from each other in their orbits, but the sun isn't in the way. If you imagine the Earth going down to 9 o'clock on a clock handle, and the sun is blocking the way, this happens about a week every 2 years. It's a little less than every 2 years, and it lasts about a week when the sun blocks line of sight from Mars to Earth. So this is one of the big advantages of this network I propose, is you go around the sun, no problem. What Thaddeus is talking about is Lagrange points, which I don't think I have an image of handy. The Lagrange points 4 and 5 that he's talking about are stable orbits about 60 degrees away from each planet in their orbit. So not all the way, I don't think you can see my mouse. So, the idea would be that you could carry communication in hops. Those are shorter hops, but they're still very, very long hops. 60 degrees away, and then Mars orbit is a very, very long hop to its Lagrange point. Same thing with Earth's Lagrange point. These are very, very long distances. And the idea I have for these networks is much, much shorter distances. But they would, yes, have, and now the other problem is you have to have satellites in those Lagrange points that have sufficient power to be able to last for a long time. They need a lot more power than the little Starlink satellites I'm talking about. So that's a project. I'm not saying it's not viable, and maybe it does make sense. So we'll see about that. Yes, SpaceX's low cost of launch really helps Starlink's return on investment. Each satellite is supposedly costs around $250,000. I wouldn't be surprised if SpaceX is building them cheaper than that. So if you talk about 10,000 satellites at $250,000 a pop, $1,000 will be $250 million. So you're talking about $2.5 billion for the satellites. And then launch cost, once Starship is operational, it's launching 400 satellites for a couple $1 million. Spread that out over 400 satellites. It's like $25,000 a piece. It's a trivial cost. So you're talking about, you know, the cost of launching the entire network gets to be really, really low. And yeah, the payback gets to be pretty quick. Let's see. So THX1138 talks about communicating between Earth and Mars using quantum superposition or quantum entanglement. I don't think that has been demonstrated as a reliable communication system for a high bandwidth yet. I think it may be first of all, it's not clear that that's ever going to work. And maybe there's some evidence. I saw a discussion about quantum entanglement, and somebody said it's been proven that doesn't really transfer information faster than the speed of light. I'm not sure whether that's true or not, but I think the bandwidth challenge with quantum superposition is going to be a big deal. If you're not familiar with quantum superposition, quantum entanglement, I'm going to say Wikipedia. That's too big a topic for this video. If a satellite has a bandwidth of 100 megabits per second, you can serve... I think you probably meant that differently. You can serve 10 users with 100 megabits per second. I think, Johnny, I think your numbers are wrong. I'm not sure what you meant there. Elon said he's specific. So let's, I think we're done here. So let's move back to, oh, here we go. So now we're on the Q&A session. So we got, let's see. 20 gigabits per second should be enough for at least 1,000 active users. I don't think that's right, Johnny. I mean, I think it depends how much bandwidth you expect to have. 20 gigabits per second should be good for, I think it's 100 active users. My house has 200 megabits per second down. I suppose if your expectation is only 20 megabits per second down, then 1,000 active users works. The other problem with your analysis, Johnny, is can the Starlink satellite handle 1,000 simultaneous connections? I don't know what kind of hardware you need for that. I don't know how, maybe that's easy, maybe that's hard. I don't know the answer to that. And then I think Jim had said there may be a second version of Starlink going up that's more capable. So we shouldn't underestimate how capable the SpaceX engineers are at making something really cool that works really well. Let's see. How many FAR rural people and third world people are going to want Starlink at the current price? Great question, Marriage Partners Ministry. I mentioned this a little earlier. You're right that, well, first of all, SpaceX can charge less for people who can't afford it. Once the network is up, you know, the cost of carrying the signal, if the satellite is flying over Africa, if it's not receiving signals and sending signals, it's wasting its time. So you could charge less for poor people and let the rich people subsidize the poor people. The other theory is that you charge people the same, but poor people, 10 households chip in on one Starlink connection. Now they're paying $10 a month for Starlink, and they've got a better connection than they had before. So I think there's different ways that works. Is Starlink portable like in your car, boat, camping? Yes, Starlink could be. You can stick Starlink on an airplane. You can't carry, I don't think it'll work from your seat, but it was tested by, I don't know if it was the Navy or the Air Force. They tested it on a jet and it worked. I don't think you want it sticking out in the wind. I don't know how you position it so that it works on a jet. But they did it. Do you see Tesla doing home stuff, or would Elon start a new company? I think it makes sense. I made a video about this week or last week. I made a video about Tesla building homes. I think that when you combine Tesla HVAC, Tesla solar, Tesla Powerwall, Starlink, you're doing a lot of a house already. Don't forget that Tesla, I don't know who's building the gigafactories, but Tesla is learning a lot about building structures as gigafactories are being built. Elon made a specific comment about, do I have that one? Elon made a specific comment about prefab. I don't think I put that one on here. Elon made a specific comment about prefab construction and how fast it was going in Berlin. He made another comment about the progress that's going on in Texas. Tesla is learning a lot about building buildings fast and efficient. So if they can build factories fast and efficient, then I would think they could build homes in a fast and efficient manner. And I think if you look at what Elon has said about how they're trying to get the roofing process down, Elon and I think it was RJ at the Q3 investor call, I think the guy's name is RJ, he was talking about how they're trying to design the process for the roof so that when the guy goes up on the roof, he has everything he needs and he doesn't have to go back down the ladder and get something that wasn't included in the package. If you apply that kind of engineering analysis, the process engineering analysis, remember, the best part is no part, the best process is no process. Merch link down in the description. Lots of t-shirts. If you think about the process of building any step in building a house, if you can make the process more efficient, then you can reduce the time it takes to build the house. So that was a great point. Brian mentioned the Boring Company bricks. I don't know whether bricks are the ideal construction medium for a home. It's certainly not what you do with prefab. I mean, maybe you can prefab brick walls. I don't think that's what they're doing with the prefab construction. There may be a use for boring bricks. Somebody actually had this great idea that you would run the boring tunnel under the houses and your garage would have I don't think this really works, but your garage would have a path down to the tunnel. I think you'd probably have one entrance for the neighborhood rather than one entrance for each home, but it was an interesting idea. Mobile phones cost $5,000 at the start, just as the cost of Tesla's cars is falling, so will Starlink. Yes, I think that Starlink's equipment will get less expensive over time. I'm not sure that the internet connection will get less expensive because it's such a high value for the people who need it. There's a huge market of people who have, like my cousin, if you weren't watching earlier in this video, my cousin lives in rural New Hampshire. He has a terrible internet connection with, I think it's HughesNet or something like that. And it's, it works, but it's got a very, very high latency. And if he is on the Starlink beta test list, and when he gets Starlink, he's going to be thrilled and he's happy to pay what it's going to cost. There's a lot of people that are going to be thrilled to pay $100 a month for high speed, low latency internet, high bandwidth, low latency internet. Let's see. Why do you think SpaceX hasn't used the single weld hull Elon promised for Starship? I do not know that much, Matt. I do not know that much about how Starship is made. I don't know what the details are. Yeah, Will, I agree. You can't prefab brick. I don't know. Well, so John Yent says brick are expensive to deliver. If you do a boring, if each neighborhood that tests, just so you understand the theory behind the boring bricks. If Tesla builds a neighborhood and they build a boring tunnel for the neighborhood to go wherever people in that neighborhood go, or they build several neighborhoods and they build boring tunnels, then the boring machine will be producing the material for the bricks on site. So you'll just need something to be able to make the bricks on site from the material coming out of the boring tunnel. So that's the advantage of boring bricks. Let's see. So what else? What questions do we have? Still prototyping. So, I don't know. I'm really excited. Check my video out at 3 o'clock today. I'm going to post a link. I can't post this link enough, I guess. This is a link to the video that's going live at 3 o'clock. Starlink. And while I'm pausing for a second, I want to mention the merch again. Got t-shirts like this. The best part is no part. I got a lot of t-shirts on teespring.com, the Critical Enthusiasm store. Check it out. Can you move a bit to your left? You're hiding behind the comments. No, this way. That's my right. Sure, I can move. Thank you, David. That was a good question. Hopefully that helps. Let's see. Prefabbing rock-type pieces like brick doesn't make sense. They're already regular pouring with easy-to-make molds or 3D printing specifically. So this is one of the thoughts I had about about Tesla building houses. And you mentioned concrete. Pete mentioned concrete. Everybody can still hear me, right? The link, Jim, you're correct. The link is set to private. No, I don't want to change the status. The video goes live at 3 o'clock. I don't think I have a maybe I can set it to premiere, but I can't really do that while I'm doing the stream. So let's, you know, if I screwed up, I screwed up. Do I like the idea of owning Starlink stock? That's a great question. Do I like the idea of owning Starlink stock? I think, well, number one, we can't. You know, unless you're a very privileged investor, you don't have access to SpaceX stock, and Starlink stock is part of SpaceX. So if Starlink has an IPO, I'll see it when I'll evaluate it when it has its IPO. It's hard to say if it's going to be a good investment. If the price of the stock at its IPO accounts for its full value, then it's not necessarily that good of an investment. I think that the potential, I don't know if I agree with, I don't agree with Dave Lee that it's a potential $1 trillion company, that Starlink alone is a potential $1 trillion. I'm not saying he's wrong, I don't see it. He might be right and I might be wrong. So I think it's certainly going to be profitable. But you know, you just have to see when the IPO happens, what's the share price, what's that translate to the valuation, and do I think it can go up from that? You know, how much do I think it can go up from that? Right now, I see Tesla as a phenomenal investment, and I struggle to invest in any, I mean, I have other investments, I own stock in other things, but I struggle to see why I would buy stock in anything other than Tesla when I see such a spectacular growth story. If Starlink had its IPO next year, and they only had 10,000 satellites up and 1 million customers, and I thought they were going to go to 100 million customers, well, yeah, then it would be, you know, if it was priced, if its valuation was based on that 1 million customers and didn't price in the growth, then sure, I would buy stock in Starlink in a heartbeat. Will Starlink throttle data like Comcast, or does Elon believe in free speech? That's a stupid question, in my opinion. No offense. I think Starlink might throttle data, but not based on the content of the speech. You may be based on what you're paying for and how much of a connection you get. Starlink stock is supposed to be a cash cow that funds SpaceX to Mars. I believe that that is one of the purposes of Starlink, is to fund Mars, along with Tesla funding Mars, that Elon will use when Tesla becomes an established car maker that has achieved his goals. I think he will sell some or all of his stock in Tesla and put that money into Mars and maybe Neuralink, unless Neuralink is already taken off. Tesla is cash cow for SpaceX, yes. What are your thoughts on Elon's latest comment about FSD being ready only at the end of 2021? So that is a great question. Thank you, Execution Code. That is something I love talking about. So I've been watching a lot of videos of FSD beta, the new FSD in beta. I think it looks good. I think it looks like it's doing better. What we can't know is how fast it's learning and how much it needs to learn. We don't fully appreciate how amazing we are in our ability to drive cars. It's, to me, painfully obvious. I have 2 teenagers at home, one who is learning to drive and one who is driving. It is painfully obvious to me when I watch my children drive that Tesla's FSD is already better than them at some things. Just a really simple example, my kids are afraid to drive on an interstate highway. FSD is already really good at driving on interstate highways. My kids are probably better at a lot of other things, and FSD has to learn to be better at these other things. But if you have a teenager, if you've ever known, a lot of young people are afraid. I don't understand it, because interstate highways, for me, they're easy. But a lot of people are scared to drive on an interstate highway, and Tesla FSD does that better than human. Probably better than me. And I think I'm great. So the challenge is how quickly it learns. What I'm seeing, it's learning really fast. And I think, to turn your question around, Execution Code, I think the biggest question about full self-driving and when it becomes available to others is, how good does it have to be relative to what? So if you think that full self-driving has to be 100 times better than the average human driver, then it's going to be a while. I think that's a terrible standard to set. I think if FSD is better than my 18-year-old kid, well, my 18-year-old kid is allowed to drive. Why wouldn't FSD be allowed to drive if the probability of accident is less than the probability of we let 16-year-olds, here in Florida, We let 16-year-old boys drive cars. They get their learner's permit at 15. They get their driver's license at 16. 16-year-old boys have horrible record as drivers. Statistically speaking, 16-year-old boys are terrible drivers, and we let them drive. Here in Florida, we let people drive after 2, 3, 4 drunk driving convictions, maybe more. Here in Florida, we let people drive with suspended licenses and face very little punishment. And there's a lot of people on the roads, depending on where you are. I'm from upstate New York. I think drivers were much better in upstate New York than they are in South Florida. But in a lot of places in the world, a lot of drivers really stink, and we let them drive. If FSD gets better than the worst drivers, who we allow to drive legally, then I don't see why we wouldn't let FSD drive. There's a huge benefit here. If you make it wait until it's 100 times better than the average human driver, then a lot of people will die who would not have died if you let it drive sooner. And I'll pose this, maybe we talked about this last week, but I'll pose this question to you. Suppose it's below average. Suppose it's 25th percentile. But everyone who's below 10th percentile stops driving and starts riding in robo-taxis. So you've taken the worst 10% off the road, and now all those people are driving with a much lower accident rate because they're in a vehicle driven by something at the 25th percentile. What I'm saying is if full self-driving is below average, but not that much below average, and if the worst drivers stop driving and ride in FSD instead, then you actually made the road safer and you saved lives even though it's below average. If you wait until it's 100 times better than the average human driver, then a lot of people are going to die while we're waiting. And I don't think that's a good plan. Yes, Jim Whitehead, all those drunks and teens give lawyers lots of business and make life hell on us. Yes, they do. I have generated more than $1 million in revenue from my law firm. I'm mostly retired now, but in my career, I generated easily more than $1 million in personal injury revenue. I generated probably $2 million in traffic ticket revenue, probably $1 million in drunk driving and other traffic crime revenue in my career. So, it's great for the lawyers, but, there's that Simpsons video of the lawyer who hears about what if, everything was better in the world and people were dancing around and he goes, ugh. So, the world would be a much better place if we didn't need lawyers so much, right? Starlink, not that lawyers are bad. I think there's a lot of good lawyers out there. Starlink and FSD are practiced for internet-connected Cybertrucks on Mars. Okay. If Starlink uses point-to-point transmissions between satellites in space, then it can make use of vector vortex beams. Nicholas, put a comment on the video with vector vortex beams or a link or something. So I'll take a look at that. A German research company is already finding Tesla to be more than 10 times better than human drivers and would already. It's not driving on its own. It's driving with people supervising it. It's 10 times better than human drivers when people are supervising it. Whether it stays 10 times better if there's no human supervision, not so clear. Some folk give guns to kids too. Well, my experience, adults who train their children in gun safety do a good job. Sorry about that. Germany wants to be the first country to allow FSD on their roads in the world. I think China is a good candidate. I think Florida is a good candidate for FSD going live. I think that's an interesting question, is where is FSD legal first? I think Florida is an excellent candidate. I hadn't heard that about Germany. My impression is that Germany has very good drivers. So for the idea, if it has to be better than the average human driver and Germany has really good human drivers, it'll take longer in Germany. Yes, the worst drivers cause most of the accidents. I read some numbers like people with suspended licenses cause 5 times as many accidents. I think teen boys driving at night with more than one person in the car. There's all of these different statistics. Like adults don't have their driving accident rate go up when they have additional people in the car, but 16-year-olds, their accident rate doubles or triples when there's more people in the car. 16-year-olds, their accident rate doubles or triples when they're driving at night. It's shocking how bad it gets. Will Tesla be a $40 trillion company by 2030 with robotaxis? So CM, my projection is that Tesla will be, now this is my very optimistic bull case for Tesla. I believe Tesla would be a $40 trillion company in 2030 without robotaxi. That robotaxi is icing on the cake. I made a video recently where I talked about $40 trillion, that, $4 trillion. was it $40,000 a share, which works out to $40 trillion. If Tesla makes 3 terawatt hours of batteries in 2030 and buys 3 more terawatt hours of batteries from its suppliers, and it puts them in products that are priced roughly where they're priced now, it's a $40 trillion company. You know, it's a $40 trillion market cap with $4 trillion in revenue. No, we can't talk politics. Let's see. CA for first FSD. I really think the drivers in Florida are terrible. Drivers in the Caribbean are awful. Like the Dominican Republic probably has the worst drivers in the world. So the Dominican Republic should be the first place with Tesla full self-driving. Anybody who follows baseball knows a bunch of successful Dominican baseball players have been killed on Dominican Republic roads. So let's see FSD in the Dominican Republic so we can save Major League Baseball. Maybe Tesla insurance will be cheaper for you if a high-risk teen driver. The car keeps you safer. Yes, I definitely think that full self-driving will lower car insurance. And that what will happen is if you have a teen, this is why it takes the most dangerous drivers off the road. So my kid goes on my insurance, and my insurance rates go up $2,500 a year. Well, if full self-driving means my kid doesn't, if we have full self-driving and my kid doesn't have to have a driver's license, it saves me $2,500 a year. Even if it doesn't lower my insurance for my driving, it just saved me $2,500 a year. So I suspect that anyone who's under the age of 10 will never get a driver's license. And maybe 12 or 13. Like I questioned whether my 15-year-old is learning to drive now. I question whether my 15-year-old should get a license at age 16. I don't know whether it makes sense for us to spend another $2,500 a year, if it's going to go up that much, for someone who drives very few miles. Kingsley Green asked me to tell more about the $40 trillion. Kingsley, I have a video that I published within the last month where I talk about Tesla at $40,000 a share. That explains my model, which is basically figure how many gigawatt hours or terawatt hours of batteries Tesla will make. It's really pretty simple. Just figure out how many terawatt hours of batteries you think Tesla is going to make, how many they're going to buy from suppliers. I ballpark it at 6 terawatt hours in 2030. Put that in Tesla products. Put it in Powerwalls. Put it in Megapacks. Put it in cars. Put it in Model Y, Model S, Model 3, compact car, robotaxi. How much revenue does it generate? I come up with $4 trillion a year. At a price to sales ratio of 10 to 1, you get to $40 trillion market cap. How well will FSD follow laws in different jurisdictions, for example, where U-turns are allowed? I imagine that's part of the learning curve, Ben. Bahamas has bad drivers too. Yeah, no, I was in St. Lucia. The driving, if you ever drive, look, I'm not poor, and I live in a place that doesn't have a lot of poor people. I live in a country that doesn't, we think we have poor people in America. We have no idea what poverty is like. If you live in America, if you live in Western Europe, if you live in Japan or South Korea, maybe South Korea, if you're old enough, you know what poverty is like. But, for most of the people who watch my channel, we don't really have a whole lot of idea what poor people live like. And if you watch the movie, just as a simple example, I'm not saying it's completely representative of reality, but watch the movie Slumdog Millionaire. Go to a Caribbean island and don't stay in your resort. Go around the island, walk down the road and notice that there's a minivan, a Toyota minivan with 20 people in it. Okay, that's the world in the poor world. Yes, I know I'm very optimistic at 40 trillion. I'm aware of that. I'm my brand name is Critical Enthusiasm. I'm very enthusiastic. I'm very optimistic. I like to joke that I think society is going to collapse, but I'm very optimistic that I will survive it. So, food, water, and ammo. It would be built into the software and be geotagged. Driving skill is still useful and will be for a while. It's like driving a standard. Driving skill is useful. I think we're probably 10 years out from robotaxis displacing most human drivers. Don't forget that each robotaxi displaces at least 5 cars. This is actually, don't you think Tesla will reach peak in sales cars by 2030? No. We have to replace 2 billion cars, 2 billion vehicles worldwide. If Tesla's producing 20 million cars a year in 2030, just to pick a number, that's only 1% of the global fleet. So I think Tesla may start bending back the curve in 2030, but I don't think it's going to be over. Was driving in Rome 45 minutes, saw 3 accidents all the way. I think Italy probably has worse driving than the UK or France. I don't know. I thought driving in France was fantastic. I drove in France in 2000, is it? I forget when I was in France. It was great. Loved driving in France. I didn't drive in Italy. I drove in France. It was great. No, Jim mentions the Bahamas, and we were in Aruba. I think it was Aruba or Curacao, and we went to some festival, and we ended up in where the regular people lived, and people live in very poor conditions. And it's something we don't appreciate. There's a lot of poor people in the world who are a lot happier than a lot of Americans. You don't have to be rich to be happy. It's easier to be rich if you're happy, but strangely, it's easier to be depressed if you're happy. We won't be able to buy Teslas in 2030. So I have a video where I talk about why I think Tesla will stop selling cars. We'll see about that. Check my channel, Tesla stop selling cars, you'll find it. One thing that will come out of Tesla's FSD is street markings and signs will be very important to maintain until there are... Yeah, there's a lot of inconsistency in traffic signage, but I think the cars are learning it as they drive. What do you think about the possibility of Tesla licensing its battery and powertrain tech as well as FSD to other... I think Tesla can use every object it makes, every battery it makes, every powertrain it makes. I think Tesla is licensing its battery tech to other battery makers already. I don't think that's a big deal. Why do I think China gave the deal they did to Tesla? This is a great question to Scott. I think I have the answer to this question. It doesn't matter how rich and powerful you are. You have to breathe the same air as everyone else. If you want to go outside, you have to breathe. You can filter your air indoors, but if you want to go outside, you have to breathe the same air as everyone else. China has terrible air pollution. Electric vehicles solve the air. They help the air pollution problem in China. If you are a very wealthy person or a bureaucrat or an oligarch in China, you want cleaner air, and Tesla can help clean the air. They will reduce pollution. So they want Tesla there. This is my theory, that they want Tesla there because Tesla is accelerating the transition to sustainable energy. They are accelerating the transition away from highly polluting fossil fuels, and it makes the air easier to breathe. So simple investors, people want to own their own car. They want that control. So this is I'm going to make my pitch here. I see a lot of people saying, well, I'm going to buy a Tesla and I'm not going to put it out there as a robo-taxi. Okay, the goal, Tesla's goal, not your goal, Tesla's goal is to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy. If you buy a Tesla and you stick it in your garage and you drive it for 2 hours a day, then you're not doing that much to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy. You're doing a little because you're replacing your internal combustion engine car, hopefully, with your EV. If you put it out as a robo-taxi and instead of driving 2 hours a day, it drives 10 hours a day, then you've just 5x'd you've just removed 5 times as many internal combustion engine vehicles from the road. If it drives 16 hours a day, which is what I think a typical robo-taxi will do, it removes 8 internal combustion engine vehicles from the road. Tesla's goal is not to make money, and it's not to make you happy having a Tesla in your garage. Tesla's goal is to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy and remove the scourge of internal combustion engine vehicles from the face of the earth. And the more robo-taxis it makes that operate 16 hours a day, the more internal combustion engine vehicles it removes from the road, the cleaner our air gets. I don't want to get into the climate change topic. I personally not that worried about climate change. You can be very worried about climate. Whether you worry about climate change or not, you want cleaner air. You want to use less fossil fuels. You want less heavy metals in the water. All the things that fossil fuel pollution creates, including CO2 if you're worried about it. All of those problems get better if Tesla makes a shit ton of robo-taxis and they drive a lot of miles. They replace a lot of cars. Chinese people want safe cars for their families also. Yes, I don't think vehicle safety is the reason that the Chinese oligarchs and bureaucrats approved Tesla. They can drive Mercedes S-classes, and those are very safe vehicles. Tesla insurance will be higher than other options if you drive wildly. I made a video this week. I probably should have talked about that. I made a video this week about Tesla insurance. Stephen Mark Ryan, who does the Solving the Money Problem channel, talked about Tesla insurance, and he projected $250 billion a year in revenue. I think he's wrong. I love Stephen Mark Ryan. I love his channel. I think he's very entertaining, but I think just like I have criticisms of Dave Lee's analysis of Starlink, I think, look, fundamentally, if Tesla's robotaxi software is driving the car, Tesla's liable for what the car does, not you, not the vehicle owner. So I think I anticipate a large fleet of Tesla-owned vehicles, and Tesla won't be paying itself insurance, so it's not a big revenue thing. I don't know if Elon really is worried about climate change. Jim, what was the question about the Australia battery? Counterpoint, unless the price of Powerwall significantly decreases, then using a future Model 2 25K can be more cost efficient than getting Powerwalls once you use it as a virtual power plant. Okay, so Elon and Drew tossed the idea of vehicle to grid. They dismissed it about as much as you could at Battery Day. Vehicle to grid is dead. We are going to see the price of Powerwall decrease significantly. It's a 13.5 kilowatt hour pack in a Powerwall. Let's call it a 20 kilowatt hour pack. If they use lithium iron phosphate in Powerwall at 40 cents a watt hour, I think $4 a watt hour, I think we're going to see Powerwalls come down to $2,000 or $3,000 each with more storage. The problem with, this idea that you're going to use, and I have 2 videos where I debunk vehicle to grid, and then Elon and Drew tossed vehicle to grid to the curb if it hadn't already been tossed before. I don't know one vehicle owner that would rent taxi their car out though. So then Tesla's going to make the cars and keep them from themselves. They're not going to sell them to you. If they're going to charge $100 for full self-driving option, you're not going to buy a Tesla, right? And the only reason you're going to pay $100,000 for full self-driving on your Tesla is if it's going to be used as a robo-taxi. So the idea that you're going to buy, look, right now, if you want to own a Tesla and keep it in your garage and not displace 5 internal combustion engine vehicles with your car, Randy, thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you. If you want to buy a Tesla and you want to keep it in your garage and not have it out serving as a robo-taxi, then buy it now. Buy your Tesla soon, because as soon as robo-taxi software goes live and the robo-taxi network goes live, the price of full self-driving is going to skyrocket. I had this conversation on Twitter today. Somebody said, $100,000 for full self-driving is outrageous. Is it really? You're getting it for 1 million miles. That means it costs 10 cents a mile. If the operational cost of the 2023 Tesla Compact Robotaxi is less than 10 cents a mile, which I think it's going to be closer to 5 cents a mile outside of the FSD, then you're talking about a total cost of 15 cents a mile when you amortize in the FSD and the cost of the vehicle. So if it's 15 cents a mile operational cost for the compact robotaxi, and you're charging $1 a mile, and the vehicle is used 60% of the time, it's occupied 60% of the time with a paid rider, then you're getting 60 cents a mile and you're paying 15 cents a mile. You're making 45 cents a mile. You drive 100,000 miles a year, you make $45,000 a year on your robotaxi. You paid $125,000 for the robotaxi. You're getting a 33% ROI in the first year, right? You're going to generate $450,000 in revenue for $125,000 investment. Okay, you're not going to pay $125,000 to stick that car in your garage and not use it. So every vehicle Tesla, they're not going to sell the car without FSD. Right? If there's buyers who are willing to pay the extra $100,000 for the FSD, they're not going to sell the car without the FSD. So if you want to own a Tesla that you're going to keep in your garage for the next 10 years and only drive an hour or 2 a day, buy it soon, because that window is closing fast. Let's see. There might be taxi fleets that would rent them out. Maybe. You can pay a lot of money to rent a Tesla, I suppose. Once these things are out, these things are going to be so valuable, it's going to be shocking. And my $40,000 a share estimate does not assume the $100,000 FSD cost. So if FSD goes live and Tesla makes as many cars I think they're going to make, the share price is going to be $100,000 a share or more. It's going to be insane. Will there be stainless steel, paintless, cheap, small Tesla? I think the jury is out on that JKP guy. I predict a future, and I have a video. If you go on YouTube and search for Podcar Robotaxi, I have a video where I forecast farther into the future. when there are no human drivers anymore, or when there are roads that don't allow human drivers or cities that don't allow human drivers, podcar robotaxis, single passenger robotaxis where the operating cost is less than 5 cents a mile and passengers can get a ride for 10 cents a mile. Let's see. FSD more useful in the US where people spend hours in the car every day. Europeans rarely need to commute that far. So, Eric, if robo-taxis enable low-cost, easy, convenient transportation, people in Europe might travel more. I think this is one of the things that people don't think about as we talk about a global fleet of 2 billion cars, and we need to replace the global fleet of 2 billion cars. Well, what if Tesla brings the cost per mile of travel down? People might travel more. Really simple example. I live in South Florida. I live in Boca Raton, Florida. People from Miami to West Palm Beach, I'm not personally me, a lot of people like going to Disney. Disney is a trip. It's, 3-hour drive. Costs, $120 each way in terms of, mileage on your car and gas and everything else. Then you got to stay in a hotel. What if I could get to Disney in a robo-taxi going on a loop or hyperloop, and I get there in a half hour for $20 or $10, and my family can go to Disneyland and back the same day? We don't have to stay in a hotel. Well, now we're going to use a lot more miles. We're going to go a lot more miles. People down here would go to Disney. There's people down here who would go to Disney every day if they could. Invest in Disney, by the way, because Disney theme parks are going to boom when the cost of transportation goes down and you don't need to stay in a hotel anymore. Do you really think governmental approval for no driver FSD will be as quick and easy as when robotaxi goes live? No. I think some jurisdictions will adopt robotaxi quickly and some jurisdictions will take longer. I think states like New York and California and Massachusetts, highly regulated jurisdictions, where they're afraid of everything, and sugar, if sugar was introduced today, it would not be legal, it would be illegal. If somebody discovered sugar today, the FDA wouldn't allow it, probably with good reason. But in highly regulated states where everything has to meet regulatory approval 10 times, and then states where the existing car companies have a lot of sway, they have a lot of special interest power, like Michigan, I would expect that it's going to take longer. In Texas, I think it's going to happen quick. We'll see. Although Texas, the car dealers have a lot of influence. Can the Tesla go across countries? I don't see why it can't. Batteries today require rare earth, which is limited. Is Elon researching? I don't know. I haven't heard a lot about rare earths in batteries. That's an interesting question, David. I don't know the answer to that question. I was not under the impression. I don't think that rare earths are that big of a deal in the batteries. I think they're a big deal in other electronics or maybe in the battery pack management system, but I don't think they're a big deal in the batteries themselves. Yes, cleaning the vehicles is a part of the job, and if Tesla owns its own network, then they will have locations around the cities where the cars will come in and get recharged and cleaned quickly. I would pay extra for the topless car wash companies than Florida used to have. Darn it. They banned them. If cities ban self-driving cars, should we expect? No, I think cities will ban human drivers. Brian, I have a video, my 10 industries video, where I think there are 10 industries that Tesla's going to destroy. One of them is police, criminal justice. We're not going to need police cars anymore. There's not going to need traffic enforcement anymore. Starlink should be an option for Cybertruck. Elon talked about Starlink on vehicles. He said that vehicles typically don't need the bandwidth. I think an RV might want it, but Cybertruck, first of all, I don't think it's a Cybertruck option. You want to buy Starlink, you buy Starlink. Do I think Apple will try to compete with their own FSD? I think they might try. I don't think they're going to succeed. I don't think they're anywhere close. I don't think anyone is close to Tesla in FSD. Maybe Mobileye, Comma.ai is a few years behind. I don't think anybody's close. Road taxes will be based on tire wear rating. Interesting. Once FSD arrives, body can be made from any light. Once FSD dominates, any environment where humans are no longer allowed to drive, vehicles will become much lighter weight. Vehicles' structural integrity will become much less of an issue. Somebody asked about the Cybertruck's design for pod cars. I included that in my podcar robotaxi video. I didn't address that. Can you guess why Elon Musk visited Sweden? I believe there are two companies one that makes batteries and one that does mining that I think that Elon may have been visiting. Either that or it's, you know, they have pretty girls there. Who knows? The new batteries will replace the need for rare metals. Did you order your Tesla tequila? I did not order Tesla tequila. I mentioned that earlier in the video. $250 is a little rich for my blood. Do you think FSD, a really difficult challenge worthy of a Nobel Prize, is just the beginning of the further development of full autonomy and its application to fully autonomous robots? Well, first of all, yes, I do think it does deserve a Nobel Prize. I'm not sure which Nobel Prize we would apply for, and the Nobel Prize doesn't... I don't think Elon would care about the Nobel Prize. I think it's one of many steps along the way to greater autonomous machines. I'm not sure what a full autonomous robot is. I don't think it's a step towards artificial general intelligence, if that's what you mean. That's probably a video I should make at some point. 4680 cell take us to 2030. I think the 4680 cell is going to go for a while. Matt Burns asked about the 4680 cell, and this is something I wanted to talk about. So there's a lot of people asking about future battery technologies like lithium metal or solid state. And the thing about the 4680 cell is it's about cost. You know, at a certain point, the energy density is good enough. I actually believe that, you know, Elon has said that a baseline for a car should be 300-mile range. And people disagree with me on this all the time. I think an urban robo-taxi will be fine with 200 miles of range. Here's my picture of that. The car goes out in the morning, it drives 150 miles. Sometime between noon and 4 p.m., the car hits a charging station. It spends 15 minutes getting charged up again, or 20 minutes getting charged up again, and somebody makes sure it's clean. And then it goes out again, and it does another 150 miles. So it does 300 miles in the day, used 150 miles a pop, you know, got charged up in the middle. That's 300 miles a day. That's 100,000 miles a year. That's, you know, at $1 a mile, you know, it's $60,000 a year in revenue. Times 10 years is $600,000 in revenue for that one car. So I think that we're going to see a world of that compact robotaxi is going to have lithium iron phosphate battery pack. It's going to be highly efficient, but it doesn't need more than 200 miles of range to serve as an urban robotaxi. Long distance robotaxis are going to need more range, and that's a whole separate question. Do I think Tesla will allow other EV companies to have access to their robotaxi network? Maybe. They would need the full... It's not just the software. They need the hardware. They would need the cameras. They would need the radar. I think that they probably would allow it for some kind of fee. You know, it could be just as simple as Tesla gets a third of the fare of the revenue, and why wouldn't they do it? Tesla is just hurting themselves by limiting the number of cars on the robo fleet with sky-high entry price for FSD. They should make the money on the back end with percentage take on robotaxi fares. So, Jonathan, Tesla makes more money, and there are more vehicles increasing the robotaxi fleet. If Tesla doesn't sell the cars at all, it just puts them out in its own robotaxi fleet. I have a video where I talk about Tesla stop selling cars. It would accelerate the transition to sustainable energy more. It would make Tesla more money. I disagree with you on that. Outer suburb and rural use of robotaxi will lab urban introduction. We have Uber and Lyft here now. I live on the edge of South Florida's population. I'm really close. The Everglades are right over there. Quarter mile, half mile to the Everglades if you go that direction. Maybe a mile. Maybe not. Maybe it's only a quarter mile. So it's probably a mile. It's probably a mile to the Everglades from here. So I'm on the fringe of the population, and we still have Uber and Lyft here. So, you know, and Uber and Lyft cost $2 a mile. So if robotaxis are going to cost $1 a mile, there's going to be more demand out here. It used to take 6 months to go across country. Many would die. Now they cry to wait for charging. Yes, that's true. Mark Potocnik, look on YouTube for Louis C.K.'s video with Conan O'Brien, where he talks about everything is wonderful and no one's happy. Something like that. Brilliant video. Just Google Louis C.K. and Conan O'Brien. Fantastic conversation. So I don't think the idea that somebody buys 100 robo-taxis and runs them as their own fleet, I don't think it makes sense. You know, it doesn't make more sense to me than Tesla just keeping them. Maybe it's a good business model. I'm not sure. How soon could we see the 4680 appear in the Model 3? I think that the Tesla Model 3 produced in Berlin, the Tesla Model 3 produced in Austin, and the Tesla I think those two Model 3s will start with the 4680 cell. I think you're going to see structural battery pack in Model 3 and Model Y, structural battery pack with the 4680 cell in Berlin and in Austin as soon as they open and start producing the cars. 4680 is coming faster than you can believe. Will the SnakeBot supercharger be released for the FSD cars? I don't know what the charging thing will be. Elon said that's an easy thing. So once the Robotaxi network goes live, that should be quick. They might want to keep the iron phosphate battery on Robotaxis between 20 and 90% charge for extended battery life. So bad for life that you're missing a key detail about iron phosphate batteries. Iron phosphate batteries do not have the same problem with depth of charge. You can run an iron phosphate battery down to near zero and up to 100 and back again, and it doesn't really impair cycle life. If you follow the news, the Tesla China has told people to go ahead and charge their cars to 100% for if they have the iron phosphate batteries. It's different advice. Nickel-based batteries are more sensitive to that depth of charge. Iron phosphate batteries are not. Iron phosphate batteries have fantastic cycle life. They are in some ways that's getting back to that point about solid state and lithium metal. Yes, somebody might come up with a better battery technology that improves energy density, but you have to lower the cost per kilowatt hour to compete with Tesla. It's the cost per kilowatt hour that matters. Eventually, when Tesla makes just robo fleets, yes, but they're still missing out on millions of existing Teslas on the road. Well, why isn't more being said about Tesla disrupting big oil? So if you check out my video, 10 industries Tesla's going to destroy, oil's one of them. There will still be a market for oil. Oil is still useful in plastics and other things, and you know, it's going to be a long time before we completely get off oil. But you know, the higher cost oil will stop being drilled. Higher cost oil wells will stop being drilled. Who will have the first electric trucks we can actually buy? You can buy them. I'm not sure what you mean by truck. You mean Cybertruck or semi? Semi will be out, and Cybertruck will both be out by the end of 2021. Having Robotaxi all over, let's say in New York, you need thousands of Robotaxis and a lot of superchargers. Yeah, there's going to be a ton of them. A lot of them. It's going to be a long time before. So if you go back to Autonomy Day, Elon put up a graph of user demand, or, you know, of when cars are on the road. And, you know, you had peaks at rush hours and things like that. Until robotaxis are produced in really serious volume, you know, millions and millions of robotaxis, there's basically unlimited demand for robotaxis from 6 a.m. to midnight. So until, you know, you're going to have to saturate a market with robotaxis before the price comes down. And there's a lot of markets that need to be saturated. SpaceX is interested in Psyche 16 asteroid. I don't think so. I have not heard SpaceX talking about Psyche. Psyche is, I think the idea of mining asteroids sounds cool, and I made a video about why I think mining asteroids is overrated. I don't think that's going to happen. The cost of iron is cheap. We have plenty of iron on Earth. That's the thing about iron, is there's plenty of iron is there. First of all, there's plenty of nickel. It just has to be mined, and there's plenty of iron here. We don't need asteroids for minerals. Not on Earth. They might be useful in space, but we don't need them on Earth. I think it's going to take more than 20 years, Jim. I think there's still uses for oil after we stop using it for cars. Toyota, okay, so Matt Burns mentions Toyota's silly comment. The CEO's comments were taken out of context in a lot of headlines. He also said that Toyota has a lot to learn from Tesla. If you read the articles carefully, you find the right article. I think it was a European news network did an article where they actually included the other quote where he said that Toyota has a lot to learn from Tesla. It was taken out of context. He's optimistic that Toyota will do well in the long run, but you know, he thinks that they offer a better menu of products than Tesla, which is true. They offer a wider range of products now, but you know, we'll see if Toyota is able to do it. Do you think Tesla will allow you to buy a robotaxi on finance? Yes. Oil for petrochemicals isn't the problem. Burning it is the problem. Right. I agree. Well, I don't know. Refineries, I think, pollute a lot too, Glenn. I think the refineries themselves pollute a lot. And they use a lot of whatever. I wonder if robotaxi will do long distance as well. I think there will be different versions of robotaxis. There will be short distance urban robotaxis and long distance robotaxis. Let's see. Which of the legacy ICE OEMs will likely accept that Tesla technology is much more advanced and accept a licensing partnering direction? Volkswagen seems to be, I think that's a tough question. I'm not sure. I think a few OEMs would embrace the idea of licensing Tesla technology. I don't know that the terms will make sense to anyone. I think that's the real challenge. 8% of 30X is nickel. Is that true? I don't know that I'm sorry, Arizona Poet. I don't know that that's true. I think you're talking about 30X stainless steel. I don't know what percent of it is nickel. I'm not sure. I've never done the math on how that works. SpaceX won the Psyche. Well, SpaceX may be doing a mission to Psyche, but mining the materials and bringing them back to Earth is nowhere near as easy as you think. The moon, maybe, but we already have precious metals on Earth. You know, the cost of going to the moon, mining on the moon, getting the materials, would you refine them before you bring them back to Earth, or would you refine them when you get them back to Earth? How are you delivering them to Earth's surface? There's a whole bunch of challenges there. There's plenty of minerals on Earth. It's just getting to them. And, you know, improving mining. I don't think the cost of mining on the moon and bringing it to Earth is going to be less than the cost of mining on Earth. I think if, you know, something like rare earths, if you found an asteroid that had rare earths, maybe that would be useful. I don't know. I'm looking to retire to an O'Neill cylinder. Yes, asteroid mining could be good for an O'Neill cylinder. Yes, that's a Jeff Bezos idea. Not an idea, but that's something that Jeff Bezos likes. Will Volkswagen... Okay, Al Gray asks, will Volkswagen be a major competitor in 5 years? No, Tesla does not have competition. That's my answer to that. Tesla doesn't have competition. The competition is EV. First of all, I've probably said this many times before. There's no EV market. You're going to see a lot of people talking about investing, looking at the car market, and they're saying there's an EV market and an ICE market. There's one market as a car market. Most people who buy Teslas used to own an ICE vehicle and probably still own an ICE vehicle. It's a car. It's a better car, but it's a car. Tesla to Tesla charging needed. I don't think it's needed, but I think it may happen. Powerwall uses nickel to its better functionality in cold weather than iron phosphate. That is the first time I've seen that, Jonathan. Jonathan, if you have a link to that, would you please send me that link? Put it in the comments or email it to wredlick@gmail.com. I would like to see that. I have never heard that before about iron phosphate in cold weather. I don't think you're correct. I think that Tesla's battery management software deals with cold weather anyway, but that's an interesting idea. I haven't seen that. I don't think they would be putting them in cars if that was true. Long distance robotaxi stops at a rest stop every 4 hours. Yes, Brian Silver, it's exactly what I say. You're going a long distance in your robotaxi and the robotaxi is running out of charge. It stops at a charging station that's on the way. You hop out of the robotaxi you're in and hop into the new robotaxi and off you go. You change vehicles in a minute. There's like zero advantage to having an extra long range. You know, once you're over 300-400 miles, if you're going on a trip, I don't see the big advantage there. An article about the Cybertruck says the 300 stainless steel series has a typical chromium content of 18%. Interesting. Okay, I'll take a look at that. I wonder then how much stainless steel is in a car versus how, you know, there's 700. I calculated that the shell, the exoskeleton of Cybertruck weighs less than 750 pounds. I think the battery pack weighs more than that, and the battery pack is a much higher percentage of nickel. So I think the steel share of nickel is small. That's my... let me say that I'm going to be clear about that. Assume there's 750 pounds of steel in a Cybertruck. And if you go back and look at my Cybertruck video, I calculated, 3 millimeters. I calculated dimensions. I came up with 750 pounds of steel. It's actually less than that because of the windows. But ballpark, I'll say 700 pounds of steel. The battery pack's 1,000 pounds. The battery is probably 90% nickel. So there's a heck of a lot more nickel in the batteries than there is in the steel. So somebody tell me if that makes sense. According to a reliable AMD leaker, Tesla is considering using next-gen AMD GPUs for its infotainment systems. I don't know if that matters a whole lot. Infotainment is a small part of Tesla's story. Oil-burning freight ships. Yeah, I think the future of using batteries and solar to power ships is good. Another idea... people talk about carrying cargo across the oceans, and we're going to be using these big ships. The question I have is, if you ran a boring company tunnel along the east coast of the United States, up to Greenland and Iceland and across to the UK and down, would that be feasible, and would it end up costing less? It would be much faster than a ship going across the ocean. Would it cost less per pound or per kilogram transporting stuff that way versus transporting it on a ship? Is that a viable cargo model? And the same thing along the west coast of the United States, around the Bering Strait, and then down along the western side of Asia, the eastern side of Asia. Would that make sense? Good question. I don't know. I don't know if you could do a boring tunnel all the way under an ocean, because I don't know if you need to come up for air. I don't know how that works. I don't know whether it's viable to run a boring tunnel across a long stretch of ocean. It's probably viable, but I think that's tricky. When will we see Cybertrucks on the road, do you think? I think late 2021. I hope to have my Cybertruck by the end of 2021. Let's see. Do you think it would be better if ICE companies started investing existing capital in Tesla, considering the ROI? Yes, I think anybody... I don't know if that's the prudent thing to do I think it would make more sense to return the money to your shareholders and let them invest in Tesla, but... A company called Dish yes, there's always disputes about frequency use, and I think SpaceX and Starlink are winning that battle, Gareth. All right, we've gone for, let's see. The big oceans have volcanic areas in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to post a link one last time. My voice is going. I finished my water. I want to thank everybody for watching. I am going to post a link again, and if you go in the description, I'm going to make the video public. Let me see if I can make the video public now. I'm going to go ahead and make this video public now, so just give me a second. Okay. So, this video is now public, so check it out. This is my video about the network I talked about earlier. The idea of a network of orbital satellites orbiting the sun that would relay signals from Earth to Mars that would increase bandwidth between Earth and Mars. So, please check out that video. I'm going to post a link again in the chat because the chat goes by fast. I know the link is in the description of the video. Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks to my Patreon supporters. Thanks especially to Bradford Ferguson of Halter Ferguson Financial. Thanks to my friend Joe Ramos, who is a sponsor of this channel, JND Consulting. Thanks to the moderators, Mark Plott and Jim Whitehead. And please check out my Earth to Mars video. Again, I'm going to put the link here. I need to do more live streams. I don't know if live streams is the right thing to do. So I'm gonna end the stream now, but I'm gonna stay on the chat. Please take a look and let me know what you think on everything. Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you very much. Check out the merch in the description. Oh, let's take this off the screen. Whoops. Check out the merch.